Last year, fundamentalist pastor Terry Jones planned to burn copies of the Islamic holy book, the Koran, on September 11th, gaining for himself an inordinate amount of publicity into the bargain, and sparking protests in the Islamic world which led to the deaths of 20 people and injuries to many others. On March 20th of this year, Jones actually went ahead with his plan, holding a mock trial for the book before convicting it of crimes against humanity and sentencing it to destruction by burning. The book was doused in kerosene and set alight. So far, this event has sparked protests across Afghanistan, notably violent protests in Kandahar, which have already led to the deaths of 10 people, and also the deadliest attack on UN personnel in Afghanistan at the UN complex in Mazar-e-Sharif, where 14 workers were murdered when the compound was stormed by a mob of hundreds. Reactions to these protests have been mixed, although I find myself agreeing most with UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon, who described the murders of the UN's workers as, quote, an outrageous and cowardly attack which cannot be justified under any circumstances. Attempts are being made to blame Jones for these protests and attacks, which to a very limited degree would be correct, as the reason given for these protests is his actions in burning the book. However, it should be obvious that those truly responsible for the deaths of these people, both the UN workers and the Afghans who have died during the demonstrations, are the people who did the killing. Burning a Koran in the hopes of insulting people should bring about disgust in any person, as it was a petty action with no wish to open a dialogue, work towards a resolution of differences, or do any benefit to the world at all. Disgust and condemnation are perfectly acceptable, even expected reactions. However, there is a gulf between the natural disgust at desecration and bigotry, and the homicidal rage that these actions have provoked, leading to burning effigies of President Obama, a man with absolutely no connection to Jones, apart from living in the same country, as well as the aforementioned murders of innocent UN workers, none of whom were even American. To blame Jones for these deaths is to remove blame from the actual perpetrators. Perhaps it could be argued that Jones should have foreseen that violence would ensue if he went ahead with his burning, but in order for Jones to be blamed for that, there must be the acceptance of a tendency to violence in the areas that these protests have arisen, and in this case, I find the actual killings much more deplorable than the original offence given by Jones' actions. An individual with whom I powerfully disagree is Staffan de Mistura, the UN's chief envoy to Afghanistan, who has stated that, quote, I don't think we should be blaming any Afghan. We should be blaming the person who produced the news, the one who burned the Koran. Freedom of speech does not mean freedom from offending culture, religion, tradition. Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference, and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media, regardless of frontiers. Nothing in there about offending people. Being offensive is not enough to justify a single murder, let alone the multiple killings perpetrated in the aftermath of this offensive action. We don't have to agree with what people say to protect their freedom of speech. This works both ways. Muslims who are offended by Jones are free to denounce him as the petty, bigoted, and ignorant little fuckwit that he is. However, incitements to violence are unjustifiable, and a special case should not be made for the criticism or desecration of certain items or subjects, be they religious or secular. For freedom of speech to remain a freedom, it must remain universal.